Well, it's been a few weeks waiting for this one and one other, hasn't it? But now we have got a new manager special from the EFL Championship as Sunderland have appointed Regis Le Bris as their new head coach. A surprising appointment after, well, 6 or 7 different people were odds-on favourite at one point for the role. Le Bris comes in ahead of the new season, having left Lorient following a relegation, which was interestingly omitted from the Sunderland statement. We'll cover that in a minute. We're going to talk about the new man. We're going to talk about last season and some of the managerial changes there and see what we think of the new man, because this is going to be an interesting season for Sunderland. Of course, it kind of petered out a bit last year after sacking Tony Mowbray on the cusp of the playoffs again, overachieving fantastically with a young squad and a changing squad, and then was replaced by Mick Beale, which was the disaster I think we all expected it to be. And then, of course, we had this interim period prolonged till the end of the season. And despite that, it's taken a while for the new man to come in, which was a bit of a surprise. But it's going to be an interesting one. So let's firstly quickly cover the previous people in the role, because the Mick Beale role was a disaster, wasn't it? I mean, we all knew it was going to be a bad appointment. The Sunderland fans from the get-go weren't really having it, which of course then led to problems with support from the start, that early performance against Newcastle, which was so poor in that cup tie, and then a couple of the incidents towards the end, the Trey Hume one, I mean, that I didn't see him and all of that stuff, absolute nonsense. It was just a man who is clearly a very good coach in Mick Beale. There is no doubt about that. In the career he's had and the support he's had from other people, he's a very good coach. He's just not a man manager. He cannot do that number one role over a prolonged period, in my opinion. And we're not even going to get into his Twitter burner accounts and all of that lot. But just a very strange appointment that was never likely to work. I think most people saw it was going to be a disaster, and it was a disaster. The only good thing, I guess, is that the issues were spotted quickly and he was gone within a couple of months. He followed Tony Mowbray, who did an excellent job. And again, after reaching the top 6 in the first championship season, which was a bit of a miracle, having taken over in late August, a few days before the window shut, after Alex Neil had walked to Stoke, to get into the top 6, played our side Luton, were brilliant in that tie. The only difference was there were no fit centre-halves in the second leg, and we had a superpowering team and took advantage of set pieces and balls into the box. The next season started well. I know that they weren't quite in those playoff places and the football wasn't quite so consistently entertaining, but let's be honest, the stars of the season before, the likes of Amad Diallo in particular, and Ross Stewart, were people that were going to be hard to replace. And when you look towards the end of the season at what Ellis Sims was doing at Coventry, what Amad Diallo was doing for Manchester United, I think you understand that Tony Mowbray was probably doing a good job. However, it's about recovering from that blip with Mick Beale and the fizzling out of the season under Mike Dodds and making progress again with the new man, because Sunderland AFC are delighted to announce the appointment of Regis Le Bris as their head coach. He'll join on the 1st of July 2024 and sign a 3-year deal. Now, I was really interested by this statement because they mentioned everything about his career, and he did a good job in his first season at Lorient, there's no doubt in that. But at the end of the statement, I'm going to go back to the last paragraph here. The Frenchman took charge of the Brittany-based outfit's senior team in June 2022 and guided them to their highest top-tier finish in almost a decade as the club registered its second highest points tally in their Ligue 1 history. Fantastic. What happened the next season, Sunderland? You've got to be fair in the statement. Come on. He got relegated in his last game in charge. It was a team that went from overachieving the first season to perhaps underachieving the second season. But that's not too important for now. We'll come back to that. Let's talk about the manager. Let's talk about his style. And let's talk about whether or not it's a good fit for Sunderland. Because it's very clear from the offset that Sunderland want a head coach. Behind the scenes, they've got a very invested sporting director team who are going to be working to bring in the signings. And a lot of those players that have come in the recent seasons under this ownership group, certainly since returning to the Championship, have either been French-based or from French descent. So I think that was kind of a bit less of a surprise to see a Frenchman come in, because we saw Didier Degarde being linked with the role, the former Middlesbrough man who had played in the North East before, but he was linked with the role earlier as well. But Le Bris comes in, and the big thing here is developing younger players. A huge part of this statement is about his role leading the club's youth development from 2012 and then coaching Lorient B and developing players to 2022. And once he came into the senior role, he has developed a number of young players, that has to be said. And there are a few now who are considered wonder kids, the likes of Junior Krupi being one of them. So I can completely get on board with that side of it. For what Sunderland want, he's the type of coach they're going to go for. I have no doubt in that. The question mark has to be about performance, though, because we've talked before about people who are good coaches, good developers of players. Are they the man managers? Now, we need to know with this one, because while they had a very good first season in 22-23, there is absolutely no doubt in that. And while perhaps the biggest positive for Sunderland fans to look at here is, much like Tony Mowbray, he's an attacking coach. His team score goals. Even the season they got relegated last year, they weren't one of the lowest goal scorers. But that also leads to a question mark at the other end, because they had the second worst defensive record in the top half in 22-23, and they had the worst defensive record in League One last season. Now, Sunderland under Tony Mowbray had found a way to be relatively solid at times when they couldn't find a way to score those threes or fours, which they were doing with regularity in that first season under Mowbray. And that is probably my biggest concern now, with a couple of holes in that defence at the moment, and with the club intent on building a young squad with players who aren't going to have bucket loads of experience, who aren't maybe going to be completely ready to make those in-game decisions themselves. Do you want a coach who's not going to be able to do that defensive side of the work as well as he is going forward? Now, there is no doubt that Sunderland have incredible young attacking talent, and that playing on the front foot is going to suit them better. We knew that from the very off. But they've got to find a way to balance that. And under Regis Le Bris, I do have those concerns early on. There was a little bit of contention in his time in Lorient because he was given a lot of football to his nephew, who I wonder if he'll come over to Sunderland as well in the coming year. We'll wait and see what happens there. But overall, I'm kind of a little bit torn on this appointment, because if you look at Sunderland last season, the one thing that went wrong really is the goals did dry up massively. They scored 52 goals overall. Their goals per game after Mowbray left was not great. It was only just over 1. And they went on considerable spells without even scoring a goal at times during the season. So there's no doubt that this is going to be an important appointment in terms of developing the style of play and maybe bringing it a bit closer to what they were doing under Mowbray than what happened in 2/3 of last season. And I think that's going to be an important thing, because we all know as football fans, forget about the results for a minute. We all want to go and be entertained. And for a year, Sunderland were doing that magnificently. They were one of the best sides to watch away from home in the Championship for a long, long time. And that really dried up last season. So Regis Le Bris is going to be important to that. He's also going to be important to developing this young Sunderland squad, because there is no doubt, again, he's a very good coach. And Sunderland, for all of their ups and downs with man managers and whatever, all of their recent head coaches have been very good coaches primarily. Mowbray always improves players. Mick Beale's a good coach. Take away the man management. Alex Neil's a good coach. So they've made those decisions in the recent seasons with the intent of them being the right ones for a young squad, which they're inevitably going to keep building. The problem for Sunderland is, at the bottom end of the table, there's not a lot of give this season. Now, we know in the Championship, that middle bit of the table is very, very tightly compacted. 10 points can sometimes separate you from a playoff race and a relegation race. We saw teams drift from one to the other last season, Birmingham being the key example. But with the sides coming up to the Championship, I know there's not a lot expected of Oxford, but there are going to be teams having a go. There are going to be teams that are strong. We're not going to see the issues with points deductions that we saw 2 years ago, bar maybe Sheffield United. And I don't think they'll be weak enough to be down there. And we're not going to see a team like Rotherham this season, I don't think. It's also a little bit tighter at the top, though, because we've seen 3 big sides go up, including 2 of the relegated ones. And we've also seen the 3 that went up come back down. So the Championship is probably a little bit more like it was 2 years ago than last year, which is going to make it perhaps easier in a playoff race. And you look at those teams who were above Sunderland and were in that race last season, the likes of Norwich, who finished 6th, Hull, who finished 7th, and they've decided to part ways with their manager. And actually, Hull City have gone for a very similar approach. They've gone for a very attacking coach who's got a great record of developing players and playing entertaining football, but not a great record of getting results. And that's maybe my worry with Sunderland here. If they hit the ground running, if they get in good players, if they can build a solid defensive line that allows the head coach to just go and focus on attacking in Le Bris, then I think the results will be good. And we've often seen that in his first season, even with Lorient B, but also with the first team, he's had an impact and he's been entertaining. He's got the fans on board. It's following that up that's going to be difficult. So I'm maybe not as worried about Sunderland for next season, other than perhaps what the expectations are from within the club. Because with Mowbray, I know there was always this little bit of perceived battle between on and off the pitch, but He finished 6th and he had them 3 points off the playoffs and he got sacked. So if Le Bris in that position, what is the expectation? Because it can't just be to be on the outskirts of the playoffs and play entertaining football, because Mowbray was doing that for the large part. Is the expectation to get into that top 6 because there are about 15 sides who probably think they can do that? Or is it going to be to develop a young team, make profits and build the model of the club? Have the club learnt from their mistakes of the last sort of year? If that's the case, I can actually see next season being a decent one for Sunderland. I'm not sure they'll break into that top 6, and of course we're so early in the summer transfer window, it's hard to tell what the squads are going to look like. But I actually do think they'll be in with a shout of being in that race. If they don't start and hit the ground running, if they get impatient, we could see another season of instability and fluctuation, because ultimately they have employed a manager who's just been relegated with a side that includes pretty experienced players. I know there's been a lot going on off the pitch with them, but Benjamin Mendy, Timuri Bakayoko, players like that, they've played at the top level, and that was experience interspersed with young players. So if Sunderland have got experienced players in the dressing room, if they bring in any big characters, will he be able to deal with them and manage them? Because that did seem to be a bit what went wrong last season. Murmurs coming out of the dressing rooms, little interviews and things like that, which suggested all was not happy in the camp at all times. But I do have to mitigate that and say, after that brilliant finish in his first season with Lorient, they sold 3-star attacking players for very good money and didn't really replace them at the same level. They tried to find players that would then be coached into becoming those, and it just didn't quite work out. So all in all, the questions we normally ask are, how will Sunderland do next year, and will the manager see out his contract? Now, it's very rare that any championship manager or head coach sees out a 3-year deal, so the answer to that is pretty much always no now. In terms of the season, I don't really know what's expected of him. And that's going to be the big issue in terms of the approach, and the board and the sporting director, Christian Speakman. What is he expecting from him? He's talking about excitement. He shares our ambition to win. Always makes me laugh in a statement. Every manager and every sporting director wants to win. Having an ambition to do so is just normal. How are you going to do that? The passion for developing talent is clearly the important bit here. And will he be given time to do that if the signs are good and the football's good? Because other managers in recent seasons haven't always been given that. So that's my big question mark. If I was calling it now before most of the window, I would say, yes, you're going to get entertaining football. Yes, you're going to get a head coach that wants to attack. So going to the games is going to be fun if you're a neutral or if you want to watch attacking football. Whether or not that's going to lead to a win every week, whether or not it's going to lead to a good defensive record based on his recent senior management experience, I'm not quite so sure. If I had to call it, I would say probably top half, but not playoffs. But that relies on patience and consistency. I do think, again, he's a coach that will have a very good away record. We saw it in his first season at Lorient. But this time around, I don't know that they're going to have enough for the top 6. That's prior to a lot of the summer signings. And I do worry a bit about the second season, because in his last job, that's where it fell off massively. And for Sunderland, I guess he's not going to be as actively involved in that recruitment. If, say, Joe Bellingham has a brilliant season, if one of the wingers has a great season, they get sold on. We know there's been talk about Jack Clark for God knows how long. If these people move on, the replacements and the recruitment, it's not solely going to be down to him. So at that point, does the issue become the sporting director? Because it was a similar issue to what was encountered last summer at Sunderland, where they couldn't find all of the replacements for the likes of Ellis Sims, Amad Diallo, hard players to replace, Ross Stewart as well right at the end of the window. So a very hard one to call overall, but I think the first season will be solid and it will be entertaining to watch. But all I would say to Sunderland fans who aren't aware of this man is just watch out for your defensive record. And it's going to be very similar to Tim Walter at Hull. 2 teams that are going all out attack. For me as a neutral watching those teams, great to watch. Will be some entertaining Friday night watch-alongs here. But I think there will be a few goals going in at the other end. That's my thought. What are your thoughts on the appointment? Of course, there is an initial bit of reaction to the fact that he was relegated in his last season of football. But after Mick Beale, it's about having a head coach that's going to get you back on track. And I think Regis Le Bris, in terms of the style and what the board want, is probably going to be able to do that. It's just whether he's going to be able to sustain it, in terms of his man management skills. My view is not the important one, though. Sunderland fans, Championship fans, what do you think of this appointment? Are you excited? Are you apprehensive? How are you feeling about it? Are you looking forward to an exciting summer? Is it making you excited to go and watch on the opening day of the season? It certainly should provide some entertainment. If you enjoyed our little look and recap of the new appointment of Regis Le Bris as head coach at Sunderland, then please do put a thumbs up on it. Subscribe to stay up to date with loads more manager specials and championship predictions from every match day, returning as always next season from the start of the year. Our pre-season predictions will be coming in about a month's time, so keep your eyes peeled for them. But for now, thank you very much for watching. You can check out our other summer managerial specials up in the eye above, as well as our recent special interview with British broadcaster Kate Mason. All of those links up there. Thank you very much for watching, for being here as always. Good luck to Sunderland fans for the new season. I wish you nothing but success in the 44 games that you're not playing Luton. And I'll see you again soon, as hopefully Burnley will appoint their manager soon as well.